Hey guys, welcome to Solo ReacTalk. This morning I'm heading back to Doom Faith Humanity. This is episode 7, made on no longer Chris Chu Shared's YouTube channel, but Das Rat. Yeah, Das Rat. In the full handle name is Das Rat Stories. Yes. So I am continuing on with Doom Faith Humanity, episode 7. If you guys want to check out my previous reaction to the other episodes, remember the playlist card for Doom Faith Humanity reaction playlist is at the top here. Just click on it and be able to access them. If you want to check out Das Rat's YouTube channel as well as the original video for Doom Faith Humanity episode 7, remember that the links are going to be in the description below. Yes, episode 6. What happened? I think, yeah, it was Captain Dan Cost as well as Sergeant Lawrence Dusk. They anointed the truck a name called Reliable Convenience. The group have been dealing with the Orcs, they've been dealing with the Gene Stealer cult, they've been dealing with Hive Gangers, and yeah, they haven't been able to enter into the Hive City just yet, if I'm not mistaken. They're trying different ways. They're trying to have these two factions, if I can say that, the Orcs and the Gene Stealer cult, to fight amongst each other, and they'll be distracted, and it will give a chance for the Commissar Katerina as well as her forces to enter into the Hive City. The Orcs also have slaves around the city. They have really just broken the will of humanity in Brotal 4, if I can say that. I wonder how Katerina and her forces are going to deal with this, especially when it comes to Private Richard Bobson. I mean, this is his home planet, Brotal 4, and I'm sure he's going to continue to advocate for saving people's lives, for helping in the liberation of the people of Brotal 4 from the Orcs. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens in that development. And yeah, well, basically, it's just been touch and go since the day the Orcs landed on Brotal 4. And so far, the team is doing good. The team is still well and alive. And let's hope that they can reach reinforcements or, wherever the Imperium of Man is based. I think on the southern hemisphere or southern continent, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember which continent is basing the entire Imperium of Man garrison forces that are left from the first assault by the Orcs. But yes, let's hope they will be able to reach Imperium of Man forces and make up a strategy to repel the Orcs and the Gene Stealer and quell the Hive Gangers as well. There's a lot of work to do on Brotal 4. Okay, let us continue with episode 7. 3, 2, 1, go.
Oscar's eyes involuntarily slammed shut as his body recoiled in anticipation of the strike, the scars on his shaved head stinging on his skin. A mere heartbeat later, his gaze opened and his blood turned to shame at the howl of a voice that was not his own.
Get up, you lazy Yumi!
One of the damn...
Oscar, I don't think... No, you're not here. Yeah, you must be someone new. Okay. Let me write down that name and let us continue.
Damnable Gretchen yelled at a woman who had collapsed onto the ground, gathering the attention of the nearby humans and greenskins as it swung the crooked letter instrument once more upon her. His eye twitched at the impact, and the second scream that followed, his hand squeezing tightly the handle of the makeshift sledgehammer he was holding. The atmosphere at the scrapyard grew more intense with each new gaze turning to the scene. Cackling wheezed out of the grots who had gathered up to join in on the delivery of abuse, mixed in with the chime of chains locked around their captives' ankles.
This xenofilth need to be destroyed. They need to be destroyed as soon as possible.
It all made him sick, as he barely held himself back for the sake of the other prisoners.
Stop it!
A small voice yelled out.
Leave him alone!
It belonged to a girl, no older than 10 by Oscar's estimation, who ran over and pushed the chief among the diminutive greenskins to the ground, the display causing the rest of its like to scatter as she defiantly stood between them and the woman. Her mother, bereft of breath, was only able to frailly lift her hand towards her daughter and attempt to tell her to run, but only managed to wheeze air out. Hearing this, the girl turned and tried to embrace the woman, but after just a couple of steps, her feet were abducted from the ground as the runt herd grabbed and lifted her in its hand.
What do you think you're doing, you little runt?
The orc barked at the child.
No one gets to bully me grots but me, 'cause I'm the boss around here, you get that?
The only thing that its disgusting butchery of the human language achieved was to make the girl cry, terrified by this monster. Fury raging within him, Oscar's mind demanded justice, and his body unconsciously took a step forward. Before he could take another, he felt the tug of the chains around his ankles and a hand clasping around his left arm. Looking back with wrath blazing on his features, he was met with the face of a scared old man who looked nearly mummified from malnourishment.
Stop, Oscar, don't! This will only end badly for everyone. Just keep your...
It's going to end badly for everyone one way or another. They're not going to let you guys go. Rather fight right now, die right now, than to be slowly, wither away as you're toiling for the orcs. You guys need to really fight. There's no other way. Do you want to die slowly? Do you want to die slowly of hunger, of thirst?
Head down and resume working, please.
The elder pathetically insisted with whispers. Shaking his head, the younger man wanted to shout back at him, but before he could, the runt herd bellowed towards all the gathered humans.
This goes for all yous, you mates. Yous nothing but weak, pathetic gits that are good for two things, doing stupid, boring jobs.
Preceding its next words, the sickening alien flashed a toothy grin.
And munching. Let this be a lesson for every other one who thinks they get to not follow orders.
After this, the orc began lowering the girl towards its wide-open maw. Her crying grew more severe as she thrashed in an attempt to break out of its grip.
Oh gosh.
The mother tried to force herself up to save her, but her weakened body was pinned down by two of the grots, one of which pulled her head up by the hair so she could watch. All the while, Oscar's bindings rattled from the shaking of his body as he struggled against the metal and the hands of the elder, whose cowardly words were barred entry into his mind. He didn't care anymore. He did not even bother to look at the other slaves and instead just tried pushing forward, his vision filled with red. Unfortunately, it did not seem like he would be able to do anything before the grisly scene before them concluded. That was, until the various voxcasters that were strewn all over the area, either by the greenskins or just surviving their devastation, blared and deafened the air of the entire district with their horn call. So unexpected was their protest that the fiendish Xeno stopped its cruel torture, holding the girl to the side as its ugly head, as well as those of its underlings, began looking around, trying to figure out what was happening. And they all did. Shortly after, the horns died down, instead followed by a woman's voice yelling out of the voxes.
Hearken, denizens of this planet. The agents of the Golden Throne have come to battle the foul enemies of mankind. And what do? Submit yourself to these damnable aliens? Where's your hatred, your fire, meant to stand against the Xenos? We have come to liberate proud citizens of the Imperium, not xenophied heretics. Rise up, maggots, repent for your weakness, and reclaim your vote. For Brotal, for the Emperor!
For Brotal, for the Empire. Yes.
Silence. Not counting for the impossible-to-stop sounds of a mechanized yard's machine occupants, gripped the air for several dozen heartbeats of confusion, until it was banished by several explosions, which seemed to herald an engine's roar. Shortly after the time it took the humans and Xenos to fix their attention in the direction they identified to be the source of the incoming sound, they would all be deafened by a speeding truck loudly crashing through the nearby pile of scrap. As it briefly flew by, multiple searing beams of light launched themselves out of it, momentarily illuminating the majestic soldiers of the Emperor before they drove off. A few of the grots were brought down by the last bolts, one of which, by some divine miracle, tore through the chain that went through the bindings clasped at everyone's ankles, next to Oscar himself, who looked down at the broken metal with new fire in his eyes. A couple of the shots struck the Runherd's free arm, their sizzling touch gouging his flesh and causing him to drop the girl.
Gah! What you standing around for, you lazy gits? After them!
He bellowed at the nearby Gretchen. The bulky Xenos was about to use his uninjured arm to wave his pack of underlings over when suddenly more pain surged through his body, while the sight in his right eye sank into darkness. It could only spare a glance to its side in order to see Oscar, bloodied sledgehammer raised high in the air before the man brought it down again and caved the side of the orc's head, which covered him in alien blood.
We are the Imperium of Man. When we look upon you, you die. Brotal 4 will never be yours. This hive will never be yours. This is where you fail. This is where it stops. Yes.
Stunned from shock, everyone present was staring at him, breathing heavily as his own body adjusted to the adrenaline rush he had entered. As soon as he got a hold of himself, he raised the now refashioned tool of war and cried out,
Ave Imperator!
Seemingly roused from some manner of spell, practically every other person who realized that their bindings were no longer chained repeated the blessed war cry, and with whatever makeshift weapon their hands could find, they set upon the grots and savaged them. Almost poetically,
What is victory?
just as the last green wretch was slain, the crowd spotted a cavalcade of Xenos rushing towards them like a tidal wave of muscle, yelling, and bleeding red eyes. What the damnable curs were not yet aware of was that now against them stood a resolute wall of divinely crimson glares, ushered forward by the blood-coated head of a warhammer. At that moment, the lungs of man tore the heavens with the name of his one true master, and he launched forth to combat the monster that dared to ravage his lands.
What is victory? When each and every single one of these green-skinned orcs that profane the lands of the Emperor are destroyed. That is victory.
Proudly, the reliable convenience plowed through most obstacles put in front of it and deep into the district, trampling any sorry Xenos that failed to jump out of its way under its tires. Within its carriage compartment, the servants of the Golden Throne recounted their offensive.
Do you think that was enough work camps we broke open for the cities that are now into a viable opposition to the Greenskins?
Ramiel wondered out loud.
It will have to do.
Katerina responded coldly before turning to Richard.
Now it's up to your people to make do with this opportunity we have given them.
I have utmost faith we will not disappoint, sir.
The private proclaimed with certitude as an increasing number of larger explosions grew more audible around them.
Permission to speak, sir.
Gargota piped up as she turned to face the group after having observed the environment. When an affirming nod from the commissar was given, she continued.
This whole place does not look right.
No shit!
Lawrence mockingly uttered.
Lawrence kind of sounds a bit different. Or maybe the voice actors are still needing to get used to or getting back into voice acting for their characters. I don't know. He kind of sounds a bit different. Also, what's his name? Yes, Ramel Bragundi. Corporal Ramel Bragundi. He kind of also sounds just a bit different. Or maybe I have forgotten what they really sound like. Because I haven't, watched any of the episodes for some time now. So yeah, this is a new episode, so it's been some time.
Shut up, hole digger.
Steelix clapped back and proceeded to relay her observation.
What I mean is that we passed by several Gargant shops that looked nearly identical to the ones we learned about on Armageddon. Yet, we haven't encountered any such walkers.
Now that you mention it, the number of filth are also not up to par for such an industrial zone.
Johann mused. Catching on to what this entailed brought momentary silence to the gathering as they processed the information. When a conclusion was reached, Dusk would be the one to voice it.
If the Xenos have begun quitting this hive en masse, that just means we need to hurry in making our own extraction if we want to outpace them to Taihaiden.
Solid observation,
Gus noted before calling over to their driver.
Speaking of, how much further, Suit?
ETA to the War Boss's base sector is 4 minutes.
Dan replied, not offering any heed to the Catachan stone, instead placing the entirety of his focus on the road.
Yeah, even the captain, Dan Cost, it kind of sounds a bit different. But like I said before, maybe they're still warming up to, voice acting their characters. Yeah. Or I have just forgotten what they sound like.
After giving another nod of acknowledgement to his information, Katerina stood up and addressed her squad.
Alright, maggots, make sure all your gear is ready and prepare for your objective. Commanders, Captain, after we disembark, I want you to haul your ass and raise hell. Cause as much ruckus as possible and distract as many of their numbers away from our position. The rest of us will try to smoke the big bastard out. First team to find him will signal the others, so we can regroup and bring him down. Every group has a signal for us ready?
Ready!
Dusk, Steelix, and Cost answered unanimously as they raised their flare guns in confirmation.
Excellent! Move fast, don't die, and happy hunting, Guardsman!
Shortly after, the reliable convenience halted in a square clear of enemies, and everyone save Dan jumped off and then ran deeper into the sector, particularly the commandos going in the opposite direction of the main group. Once left on their own, the machine and its driver also resumed high speed in a different direction, the truck's engine and horn blaring to gather the attention of the greenskins. It didn't take long for a small crowd of aliens to be hot on the pair's heels. Despite the densely packed buildings, Cost's maneuvering kept them at a relatively safe distance, with the occasional plink of gunfire impacting the truck's rear plating. That was, until he turned a particular corner, from among which erupted a large buzzsaw, which nearly clipped the Mortian's head, but he managed to duck in time, saving his own flesh and his cap from being...
Oh yeah, I forgot that the roof of the truck has been ripped off after they escaped from the Underhive city. Who were they being chased by? I think they were being chased by the Genestealer cult, if I'm not mistaken. And the blast doors of the Underhive city were closing, and Dan Cost had to move as fast as possible with the truck. They barely made it. Like the roof went flying, but the rest of the truck is still okay, essentially. So yeah, that's why the buzzsaw almost got Dan Cost's face right there. Okay.
Damaged. While it was presumed that no walkers were present in the district, that was apparently not entirely true, as what caught onto his scent now was a kilocan. The grisly metal beast was covered in rusted red, with the only exception being its cavity yellow tusked jaw. On either side of its garbage bin body were 2 long arms, one possessing the recently evaded buzzsaw, while the other bore a large slug thrower of alien design, which in turn spat death towards its perceived prey. A malignant green eye near the center of its body kept track of said target as its robust legs hurried after it. Unlike the greenskin rabble, this blasphemous construct was able to keep up relatively well with the two by virtue of being able to smash through the various buildings instead of having to zigzag through the streets. Another point of concern was the caliber of its weaponry. The slugs which it fired did not just plink off of the plating, but actually embedded themselves and bored through it. One slug, likely driven by the hand of the disgusting piggish gods of the Xenos, would have nearly struck the captain, but by the Emperor's virtue it missed by a few centimeters after boring through the backrest of the driver's seat. Instead, it impacted into the front console, tearing open a hole that exposed the engine compartment.
Oh my gosh. Is this going to be the end of the reliable convenience? Huh.
Still, the Mordian remained unflinchingly resolute as he kept up speed. What actually broke him out of his near trance-like state wasn't the enemy fire, but its gradual reduction. Briefly turning around to investigate what had occurred, his eyes widened when they saw that the walker and the orcoids surrounding it slowed down and had turned their backs, having apparently lost interest in the speeding vehicle. This would not do. At the very least, the Killacan could not be permitted to roam freely, since none among them had access to something that could reliably get rid of it. Or, well, almost none. Dan thought, as he looked at the hole to the engine, and then to the flare gun next to him.
Frackin' personal initiative!
He cursed under his breath as he adjusted the gear stick in reverse. The retreating mech and its surrounding escort halted their retreat at yet another bellow of a horn. When they reversed their field of view, they would be met with the reliable convenience facing them down. Its engine revved several times in a gesture that the accursed beasts seemed to understand, as they all began roaring defiantly, while the Killacan revved its own engine and saw in a similar fashion, after which all of them charged towards the truck. It, in turn, whirled its tires and shot forward at the assaulting aliens. From behind the wheel, Dan glared under his cap, his lasgun and sack of supplies harnessed over his shoulders while he held onto his flare gun, having inserted its barrel into the hold of the engine compartment.
Okay, soldier, repeat after me,
he grimly uttered. Somehow, unprompted by manual input, the reliable convenience's engine rumbled after each word of his as if following the command and repeating.
Yeah, it's the machine spirit.
Warmordian!
His foot embedded the gas into the metal frame, his mechanical steed surging forward down the street like a loose projectile.
The God!
Not waiting to see the result of the charge, the honorless, mewling bastards unleashed their guns as Daka towards the incoming vehicle, opening more holes and tearing small bits off of it, but failing to halt its momentum in any meaningful way.
And the Emperor!
With this final shout, he pulled the trigger, sending the flare into the engine, and then leapt out of the truck, briefly rolling on the ground before coming to a halt. Unlike the blast door of the Underhive, this was a contest in which the reliable convenience was the clear superior. With its significantly higher velocity, its greater bulk crashed into the Killacan and pushed it off of the ground, carrying the mech along with it before crushing it into the wall of nearby rubble. Despite being flattened almost in half, the cursed contraption still lived and attempted to saw the truck off of itself. It would receive improvised aid from the gaggle of Xenos whose poor attention span missed the driver's escape, and instead made them run after his steed and begin beating it to death. Just as they were cutting into it, the flare's presumed zenith was reached and it burst, causing the engine to violently explode. The sheer force of it gutted the Killacan, killing it, while the now loose metal of the frame shredded most of the surrounding orcoids in a hail of shrapnel.
Well, at least the reliable convenience went out with a bang, and not with a whimper. Good luck.
Followed by the promethium from its veins splashing out and catching fire, dousing what few aliens remained and their surroundings like an improvised flamer. Before any could extinguish the flames, their heads would pop from the stellar marksmanship of the Mordian as he quickly picked them off. After the last vermin was put down, Koss would pick up, dust off, and finally put on his cap, then gather his belongings. Fully equipped, he stood up and gazed at the fiery scene. Breathing in deeply, he clicked his heels as he stood at attention in perfect parade stance, with one of his hands shooting up to give a parting salute of respect to the reliable convenience's funeral pyre. He remained motionless in this pose for about a dozen heartbeats, before the ground shook slightly, and his side glance caught a glimpse of something bright shooting up high in the air. Mere moments after he gave the phenomenon his full attention, it turned out to be a flare which burst in the sky. A small sigh of relief that he had not wasted resources escaped the captain as he began running in the flare's direction. A fairly
So far, so good.
similar situation was taking place further away on the opposite side of the sector. Gus and Gorgoda had their own band of Xenos on their trail, which was notably smaller than the one that chased after Koss, but it was not from a lack of trying, but simply due to not having as many loud tools on their hand to attract attention. Rather than the streets and roadways, their chase took place on the rooftops of the district's buildings, allowing the far more agile commandos to keep a safe distance ahead of their pursuers. During their sprint, they spotted, then specifically ran and leapt towards two buildings with a large gap between them, over which the Greenskins had apparently built a shoddy makeshift bridge. After easily clearing it, the Kanachan and the Armageddon spun around, seemingly ready for a fight, further enticing the aliens to double their efforts. Just as their mob rushed onto the bridge, the First Lieutenant loosed two precise shots from her long lance into the supports on the opposite end of the bridge. Having clearly been designed to allow the diminutive Grot's path, the weakened from the heat scrap metal gave under the weight of the Orkoids, sending them
bye-bye,
crashing down several stories. What few that had not gotten on the bridge at the time briefly stared down in surprise until a few more las bolts pierced their skulls. Those that survived the fall would need a couple of moments to shake the daze off, at which point they would notice that they had landed in what could be described as a bowl of scrap. Moments after that realization, their attention would be called by a whistle, prompting them to look up, just in time to see the grinning Wild Knife take out the pins of two frag grenades with his thumbs and then casually drop them.
Yeah, catch.
Which was then followed by two shredding booms.
Ah, that moment when you see the realization in their eyes always gives me such a kick.
Gus chuckled as he observed the vegetable food dip he had created.
Vegetable food dip. Oh gosh. And I've been told you can actually eat orcs. So yeah, definitely it's a vegetable food dip. Yeah, I think that's maybe one way to scare the orcs. You know, if we start eating them, or if they start seeing us, put their, fellow orcs on a spit roast and just display it in front of them and say, orcs are delicious. Orcs are nutritious. You guys are made out of, you guys are vegetables, if I'm not mistaken, or fungi. So yeah, definitely. We're going to eat you guys. Show it to them. Show them that fear. Give them that fear. And I'm sure they're going to start running away.
Once you get to know them, they become a lot less scary and more funny.
Gargoda agreed as she brought up her weapon, using its scope to survey their surroundings.
Bit of a shame there were so few of them. Do you think we diverted enough to give the boss lady a clear shot to the war boss?
It will have to do. We don't exactly have...
She began replying, but cut herself off when she spotted something in the distance.
Thrown on Terra.
The sudden change in tone made the second lieutenant raise an eyebrow and question.
What's the matter?
Have a look at that.
Handing the longlast to him. Doing as instructed, the Katachan observed the direction he was given and himself received realization of what had resulted in the more serious air to flow in. Far across from their position was another of the enormous orc workshops, inside of which resided the seemingly half-complete form of a Gargan. All around it he could see tons of both the diminutive greenskins and their orcish Mechanicus counterparts running around, attaching what looked like large fuel tanks and likely hurrying to finish the construction so they could join in the chaos that was being unleashed.
They need to find a way to sabotage that thing. Destroy it before it launches.
That's one giant, ugly motherfracker.
He commented as he returned the weapon to its owner, then walked to the other end of the roof, trying to get a better read on their surroundings.
If we could somehow get to it and send it sky high, that would probably gather all the orcs in the whole district. But we can't really do shit to it with just a few grenades.
Steelix mused with a sigh.
You guys need to find the fuel lines that, transfer fuel into this mechanized Terra. You need to find a way to use its own fuel against it, and put your grenades on it, and have extra darker in terms of the explosion. So yeah, I think that's what you guys need to do. Just find the weak points and just watch it go boom.
Behind her back, Wild Knife's own demeanor changed, his eyes and subsequently smile widening as he said,
Might not need to waste our nades. I got an idea. So we better brush up on your grunty language.
This time, it was the Armageddon's turn to look back at her squad mate with a raised brow. Further down, a truck was dashing madly towards the nearest source of fighting that it could find. Its model was a hefty troop transport with a single driver in an enclosed cockpit, save for one thin hole in the back, which was used by the Rundherd that was the prime passenger to use his beating stick on the driver. In addition to the two orcs, the open carrying compartment had a handful of grots as well, being the handler's posse. Distracted by the engine roar and the sounds of fighting all around them, the orc behind the wheel barely noticed a few Huey pea shooter shots, followed by two notable clangs on the metal of his vehicle and a brief sound of scuffle which suddenly died.
What the zog's happening back there?
He demanded. Before he could turn his head to look through the hole, the Rundherd yelled back at him.
Keep your eyes on the road, you git! Some of the runs got uppity and tried to use of the looted shoot us. So
Yeah, what she said.
Crampen.
The power behind the yell of the bigger orc made the driver keep his gaze locked forward. Shortly after, though, his brain processed that something wasn't too right, prompting him to ask,
Oi, hold up! I don't remember any groats having any shooters. And what happened to your voice, biggin?
They had some, kept it hidden, and shoot me in the neck. So that's why my voice sounds off.
Right.
Confusedly, the smaller orc raised a brow in thought. This information went against what he knew, or well, paid attention to know, but he did hear the noises, so the Rundherd must have been telling the truth. In the end, he decided that since it wasn't fighting, he didn't care to prod further. However, his confusion would return after the bigger orc's next words.
Anyways, we got sawdust from the boss of the Taki Squeak.
Wait, since when are you good at talking squig? Wait, what is a talking squig?
The reply to his questioning was preceded by the Rundherd's beating stick coming in through the hole and smacking the driver on the head.
Of course I got the Taki Squid, you stupid snot-eater! I grow them myself.
Sorry.
The smaller orc yelled to avert any further beating.
Okay, so what's the boss say?
He says some of them big homies inside the gargant that's being built over yonder. Space Marines.
At the mere mention
Just Space Marines and you know.
of the proper killy Yumis to Crump being around, the driver's blood flushed with adrenaline and excitement.
Serious? Boy, that's grand. But how them Yumis even get inside a half-built gargant?
Another smack of the beating stick was delivered to his head.
I don't know and don't care. Who's getting a right proper scrap today? Boss says to get in the red fast and not stop for anything. And first get in, the fancy helmets. Get to keep all the flashy duck and goobits from them.
His excitement was further enhanced to the point where most logic was discarded in favor of speed.
You got it, Rundherd!
In a sudden jerk, the vehicle turned away from its current path and diverted itself towards the last active Gargant workshop. Said excitement would somewhat begin to die down when they began approaching the actual location, particularly after the driver saw multiple grots and mechs start forming in front of his path and waving their hands in a gesture for him to stop.
Don't stop. Keep driving forward.
Drive into the gargant.
What?
You heard me, Yagit. Drive into the gargant.
But will that be bad?
No, it wouldn't. The Space Marines are in there.
Then why is all them mechs waving us to stop?
Them's just gits that want to sneak the Space Marines first. You want the boss to be happy and give you goobins? You push that pedal hard and drive into that gargant so we get him first.
Exactly.
Besides, it ain't finished so this truck can go in easy, so it's safe. Go for it and don't stop.
Yeah, that made a lot of sense to the smaller orc. He could clearly see that there wasn't a speck of yellow anywhere on the target.
Gotcha, boss! Who's gonna get in there first?
Atalat! War!
War!
The Rundherd yelled. The driver repeated the war cry and began to cackle madly, embedding the gas past the floor of the truck. So overwhelmed were his senses that he did not notice all of the sounds of someone jumping off of his vehicle. Zealously, he trampled through the other greenskins that stood in his way and rammed himself into the Gargan's frame, right into its fuel tanks.
Yes, well done.
Getting up from their roll on the ground as quickly as possible, Gergoda and Gus broke into one of the nearby buildings for cover, crouching down and plugging in their ears. Less than a minute later, the ground shook violently and a hail of debris poured over their hiding spot, which thankfully remained intact. When they thought the worst of it had stopped, the pair walked out. Gleeful satisfaction plastered on their faces as they looked upon the enormous pillar of smoke that rose from the unborn Gargan's burning remains.
No, that's bound to get most of them here.
Steelix chuckled.
Nice.
Wildknife added as the pair exchanged a high five while still observing their handiwork. As he trailed the expanding inferno in the air, the Cab-Champ spotted the shining beacon of a flare also ascending alongside the plume.
And it seems we were just on time. Let's go.
Job well done, guys. Job well done. Huh.
The final group had a more direct destination in mind. After disembarking, they would head directly for what they presumed was the war boss's personal lair, based on his patterns which they observed before launching their assault. Unlike the other teams, they could not afford any greenskin presence around them, due to which every single Xenos encountered on their trek up the ridge, crested by said lair, was put down immediately upon being encountered. Dusk, Burgundy, and, amusingly, Bobson were the ones mainly doing the killing via mass fire over the course of their speedy uphill hike, given their more standard armaments. Gruber's discipline contained the righteous fire within his soul, since he needed to preserve his Helgun's limited power pack ammunition for when they encountered the war boss, resulting in him only firing upon the biggest and most dangerous aliens that would rush at them. That left Katarina and her replacement last pistol as the only reliable backup, since she too preserved her bolt pistol for the main engagement. In that regard, what her current weapon lacked in power, she made up for with accuracy, outright slaying or at least destabilizing enough of the incoming green tide for the infantrymen to keep their path cleared. Another brute that matched the two big ones they encountered in the Emperor Springfields had its head melted by the Helgun, prompting Johann to call out,
"Down to 10 shots, sir."
This confirmation brought out a growl out of the Commissar, but her irritation was slightly restrained by Lawrence's call-out.
50 meters until we clear the ridge, and we'll be right in front of the compound.
With concentrated breathing instead of words, they continued, until finally coming face to face with the building in question. If its entrance had any guards, they had either left earlier, or were just among the waves that threw themselves against the guardsmen's advance. The orcs' idiosyncrasy for impracticality came useful, for once, as no doors seemed to be present, allowing them easy access into the dilapidated structure.
Yeah, but also this sounds like a trap. Remember that you guys are dealing with a war boss, and it's different from just dealing with any run-of-the-mill orc. You're dealing with a war boss, and war bosses tend to think a bit more on how they're going to, proceed with their plans. So you guys might be entering into a trap here. Watch yourselves.
Said trait repeated itself in the interior as well, allowing them to effectively and carefully split up into a sweep of the place. A grot panted heavily, trying to hide from all the loud noises happening outside after he snuck in here. It poked its head around a corner to check if the coast was clear, and as it did so, Richard's bayonet went through its skull before the private kicked the limp body off. He spat on it before shouting out,
"One small fire eliminated. Clear."
Confirming that the sector he swept was secured.
Wow, Bobson. This is spitting at the enemy now, Harvey.
Shortly after, the corporal, sergeant, and finally the quartermaster issued their own confirmations, all sharing the fact that they had not encountered any Xenos to kill, unlike their junior in rank. When they regrouped, the Krieger reported,
"Whole complex is deserted. Definitely in a rush, since I found several big stockpiles of weapons and other various things."
This music is nice. I like the music that's playing right now. Okay, I'm gonna get it. That's right. I like this music here.
Likely the scum's choice object of value.
The distraction seems to have worked too well, getting the damn creature's attention to move like this without even supporting rockets.
Okay, we've established that the war boss isn't here. Where do we go to try and find her?
Richard questioned. As if to answer him, a loud boom became audible, followed by the ground shaking. All of them would momentarily share a glance between each other before running out of the building. Upon exiting, they would be met by an enormous plume of smoke in the distance, and the backs of 3 gargantuan orcs, one of which towered over the other pair, who were also looking at said plume.
It must be the war boss.
Sergeants!
Katerina yelled, dropping the last pistol and pointing forward her Godwin in a blinding fast motion, continuing with,
Everyone, fire!
Before she had even finished the command, the Cadian drew the flare gun with similar speed and fired it upwards, just as he and the other 2 infantrymen unleashed a torrent of last fire. Alongside them, Gruber loosed 3 discharges, and Arconi aimed a single bolt towards the war boss's head. Unfortunately for them, the 2 smaller orcs were apparently paying attention and wheeled around as soon as they heard the commissar's voice, clamping together a pair of massive metal slabs like shields, which blocked all of the incoming projectiles. Raising her hand, Katerina made her soldiers cease their fire. Once the cloud of dust and smoke cleared, they could see that the shields sizzled with melting metal, but their overall structure was intact. Their wielders were similarly encased in heavy, unpowered plates, with thick helmets presumably made in mockery of the human concept of knights.
Okay, since there's these armored protecting orcs, protecting the war boss, right? I think you need a diversion. You need some who are going to get the attention of these armored orcs, and then at least maybe two people can just circle around and attack the war boss from a different direction. Yeah, while these armored orcs are preoccupied with the main force.
Surprisingly, they were silent, but that was likely because the largest among them spoke next. Standing back up after apparently crouching behind the shields, the war boss towered over its underlings by a full head. Unlike them, he bore no armor, just a crude-looking top, pants, and boots.
We need a sniper to snipe that head off.
Save for the iron jaw around his neck. In another break from greenskin convention, at least as far as the 5 knew, instead of pieces of metal or bone, what mimicked the teeth of this orc's iron jaw were pieces of ammunition, with what looked to be the shells of a small cannon forming the tusks of it.
Wow.
All of them rattled as the beast shouted,
"Did you not do all this? Thought you could just run in here, rattle me boys, break me gargants, and steal me goblins? I sorgen Dex you I will, 'cause I'm bloody Boss Dackerjaw."
Boss what? Boss Dackerjaw? Wait, let me go back. Yeah, Boss Dackerjaw. Okay. Or it's bloody Boss Daka Jaw. That's a nice name, Daka Jaw. Because literally Daka is all over his jaw. Yeah, okay.
Boss Daka Jaw!
Just as he finished, his guards jumped to the side, acting like a parting stage cloth in revealing their piggish master's armament. In his clutches, the enormous orc held some kind of amalgamation of numerous guns, welded, tied up, or nailed. The sheer variety of firearms were squished together in the visage of a metallic honeycomb that was still attached to a hive, the backside of which presumably contained the trigger gripped by the war boss, whose other hand held onto a handle further to the weapon's front. The final detail of note were the several tails of ammunition ranging from small arms to grenades, which leaked out of the absurd construct, all of which served to widen all of the guardsmen's eyes.
Back inside!
Arconi ordered, her squad synchronously turning around with her and running deep into the building.
Whoa!
Dakajaw bellowed as he squeezed the trigger almost to the point of bending it out of shape. After only a couple of seconds, his miniature handheld Space Hulk vomited forth a seemingly unending colorful tapestry of Daka. Him and his boys laughed maniacally as the torrent of ordnance mercilessly mulched through the metal and rockcrete. Pinned deep inside, the demi-squad sparsely convened as destruction reigned around them.
"Sir, what are your orders?"
Lawrence tried yelling through the cacophony of ruin. Having apparently heard him, the commissar did her best to call back.
We have to get the thing's attention off of us. Try finding a way out and regroup.
Her words were interrupted by one final explosion, followed by multiple metallic cracks, heralding the building's collapse. Outside, the Greenskin's laughter slowly grew more audible as Dakajaw ended the stream of his namesake, choosing to delight in the death of the structure. Lurching slightly, its obliterated husk tore itself under its own weight and crashed down into a pile of rubble and rebar. Not long after, the final pebble that was thrown into the air fell back to the ground. The orcs gradually calmed down.
Well, that'll do it. Now it's just gonna wrangle back all the humies and me stuff's gonna be just fine.
Dakajaw declared proudly, closing his eyes in satisfaction as he grinned smugly. Several heartbeats later, however, his eyes shot open, his face painfully contorted in panic, and he yelled at the rubble pile.
Me stuff!
Immediately he prodded his knobs with his mega shooter, adding,
Go in there, digging!
Suddenly there was movement among the debris. Following its noise culminated in the Xenos seeing one of the bigger slabs get pushed out, allowing the green and black armored humies to crawl out. Upon confirming visual of the aliens, the pair briefly nodded at each other before hefting their las guns and breaking out into a sprint down the slope on the side of what once was Dakajaw's lair. He briefly followed their path before his teeth grit with a near metallic screech, and he then yelled at the knobs.
And get those zoomies!
They momentarily froze up from the sudden outburst of rage from their boss, but quickly recovered and thundered on after the escapees. Dakajaw himself adjusted his stance in preparation to heft his mega shooter, but his intentions would not come to fruition. Crackling through the air, two Hellgun las bolts impacted directly onto his gun, turning it into molten slag in his arms. Before his brain could even process the sudden dose of wrath that was set ablaze in his veins, something else thundered and impacted the bottom of his iron jaw on his left side and detonated. His decorations fell and burst around him, while the round that caused their dismantling left the side of his jaw flayed to the bone and bleeding. As soon as he recovered, he turned to search for the source of this insult, his eyes landing upon the dusty bodies of the pointy hat and gas mask humies standing on the opposite end of the broken structure and closer to the cliffside crest of the ridge it was built upon. Shooters levied at him. Nearly liquid fury seeped out of his being as he shouted,
"Those were me favorites!"
and charged.
You're gonna die with your favorites. You're gonna die with your favorites, Dakajaw. Oh, I should say bloody boss, Dakajaw.
While that transpired, Lorenz and Ramil found themselves in a near equally unenviable position. Despite the walls of the room to their demi-squad had occupied holding up most of the bulk of the ruin that nearly crushed them, apparently there were some residual subdermal injuries suffered, since their running was nowhere near as potent as when they escaped from the Underhive. A fact made blindingly obvious by the trash heaps of flesh and metal that were gaining on them. It was a feat most surprising to the guardsmen, despite the fact that they were running downhill.
Got any enlightened ideas, Your Holiness?
A few. Die standing, find out how far a coward can run before he dies, or pray to the Emperor for an option 3.
Are you calling me a coward for following orders to get them as far away as possible? You cunt!
I have faith that we've crossed that threshold, and that now is the time for valor.
Exasperatedly, Dusk shook his head in agreement, after which the two whirled, intending to empty their clips in a glorious last stand, however short it may be. Just as they did so, after the surging orcs, in the periphery of their vision, they noticed something leap off of one of the nearby buildings. The midday sun revealed the assailant to be Gus, who landed on one of the knobs' shoulders, wrapping his legs around its neck and one arm around its head for stability, then jabbing one of his knives through the eye slit of its helmet. A sudden...
You know, in the beginning I didn't like Gus. I didn't like Gargota. But they are growing on me. I've said this before, they are growing on me. And I'm happy that they've decided to play team, to play ball with the team instead of being loners, instead of being survivalists. You know, they've joined forces, of course, under the assistance of the commissar, you know, but really, I'm glad that they're here.
An howl of pain tore itself out of the beast, which dropped its shield and club as its unarmored arms began flailing in an attempt to grab onto the Catachan, who in turn yelled at the pair.
First support incoming! Take the other one!
Not really understanding the Humi speak, the other knob chuckled amusedly at its peer's misfortune. Its mirth would be ended when its back sizzled with a hot pain as the Maccabian and the Cadian unloaded their packs into it.
I guess the Emperor doesn't want us to die today. We have a chance here!
The sergeant loudly said with renewed vigor as the two ejected their now empty power packs.
I'd agree with that, but that doesn't seem to be working at all.
The corporal replied in a similarly amplified tone as they clipped in fresh packs in near unison.
Got any tactical ideas, Sarge?
For now, we should...
Whatever train of thought Lawrence may have had was utterly derailed by the roar of the second knob, which once again barreled down after them, shield raised to protect it against any further incoming fire.
Evasive maneuvers! Evasive maneuvers!
The Cadian shouted, prompting himself and his companion to again turn in an unlikely attempt to avoid the thunderous charge. Moments later, Gergoda arrived on the scene, on top of the same building Wildknife had leapt from. Immediately she focused her scope on the assaulting orc, but her attention was grabbed by a shout of pain. The other Xenos had managed to grab and pry the second lieutenant off of itself and threw him back first onto the ground, evicting the air from his lungs. The blood-crazed creature then grabbed a huge chunk of nearby debris and lifted it over its head, intending to splatter the Catachan before he could recover.
Come on!
At that same time, the first knob reached striking distance of the infantryman, swing with its own chopper along with its next footfall, which could not be dodged by both men. If he had the Emperor on his shoulders, maybe one of them could make it. With her intervention, both were likely to live, so it became a matter of who she should let die in this circumstance. Suddenly, far from the side of the half-blinded knob flew a discharged lasbolt, the heat of which could be felt even from her high position. It struck and blew off both of the orc's elbows in nearly the same time.
Is it Captain Cost?
Robbed of those key tendons, its grip on the large chunk of rockreed failed and the stone mass fell on top of its head, the impact causing the alien to fall down on its back. Thankful for the intervention, Steelix once again honed in on the other greenskin, letting loose a hotshot lasbolt from her longlass. It went between the plates of the knob's greave, piercing and melting through the ankle of its foot that was coming down. When it connected to the ground, it was not able to compensate for the large amount of weight pressing down on it, ruining the orc's balance, causing its strike to miss both of its intended targets. Due to the force put into said strike, however, it pulled the destabilized body forward, causing the beast to fall flat on its face between the Cadian and the Maccabian. The pair only spared a blink of their eyes at each top of the creature and sinking their bayonets in its neck. Their strikes were placed in a manner that allowed the muzzles of their lasguns to go under the orc's helmet, at which point they pulled their triggers, emptying their new packs directly into its head, until it was nothing more but roasted mulch within the metal encasing it. Relieved from the development, the first lieutenant raised her scope to try locating the source of divine intervention that hated them. Her search would not take long, as a somewhat mired form of Cost came running into view to their position. Gus was still breathing heavily, pumping as much oxygen into his body as possible so that it and his surging adrenaline could get him back on his feet. The sun's baleful
Let's go.
glare into his eyes did not help with that at all. Thankfully, it was blocked by someone stepping above his view. Just as Wildknife's vision cleared to identify the saintly visage, Burgundy extended a hand down to him while saying in an amused tone,
It is no time to be lying down on a job, soldier.
So you guys needed some help. We ran over as fast as we could.
The Catachan replied as he reached up to take the offered hand.
You magnificent son of a bitch.
Ramil chuckled as their hands clasped and he pulled the larger man up.
By Drusus, you're the last man I expected the Emperor to support their rescue.
Now elevated, the second lieutenant could see that their unit began to reform. The first knob slightly groaned and attempted to move, but would not get the chance as Gergoda put 2 quick shots through the holes of its helmet and into its brain. Before any other form of pleasantries could be exchanged, the Mordian cut in.
Enough chit-chat. The Kurds are getting restless. My Where are the Commissar and the others?
They're busy.
Up on the ridge.
Lawrence pointed up.
She told us to get these two away, so their group could focus on bringing down the war boss.
Then cease talking and get a move on!
The captain commanded and continued running up, followed by the rest. Drowning the surrounding area with its disgusting war cry, Dakajaw's immense stature carried itself with uncanny speed. Katerina and Johann fired back at it as they retreated further up, but neither of the 2 bolts or 3 discharges landed a proper hit. When the warboss ran by the collapsed building, Richard jumped forward, trying to stab it with his bayonet, but he mistimed his attack. Before the blade could reach the Xenos' flesh, its arm struck the private with its running motion, the behemoth not even noticing the PDF. From just the force of that absent-minded collision, Bobson was sent sliding on the ground, the rucksack harness he wore tearing off of him and nearly spilling out. Noticing the failure of the ambush, the Krieger briefly stood his ground and attempted 2 more discharges in the Greenskin's direction. Only one of them would hit, but unfortunately, Dakajaw managed to raise his left arm to protect his head, causing the shot to only leave a large hole in his forearm. Gruber had no time to pull his trigger again, as the lurching beast reached his position and swatted him away with his right backhand, sending him to crash on a large slab close to the Brutalian's position, knocking him unconscious. This left his path towards the Hume boss wide open, allowing him to freely rampage forward and engage her in close quarters. Contending with the behemoth was an abysmally similar experience to her fight with the mech boy for the Commissar. The swinging of his fists little better than random swinging, but it was not at all apparent whether that was because this particular Xenos lacked melee skills due to its preference for ranged weaponry, because it was too lost in its blood frenzy, or because it was under elaborate ploy like the one Arconi previously encountered. Regardless of it, she would not make the mistake of underestimating him like she did the last orc she dueled. Unlike the mech boy, however, this bastard was woefully different in one aspect, lacking proper armor and weapons. Her saber's power field gleefully activated, and she swung it in an attempt to parry a slap from Dakajaw's open left palm. It effortlessly chopped off the 2 lower fingers and their segment of the hand, giving Katerina the space she needed to avoid being struck by the remainder of the appendage. What she did not account for was the strength of the gust that the open swing had created. It forced her up from her crouch and back a couple of steps, nearly sending her to her doom as she almost stepped off of a high cliff.
Oh my gosh.
In an instinctual reaction to get her bearings, she turned around for a couple of heartbeats, seeing that they had reached the very crest of the ridge. Less than a step away from her current position was the tall cliff edge that descended for nearly 50 meters. What came as an extra shock to her was the sight of a massive mob of greenskins running towards their position in the distance. These precious few moments of distraction would prove to be an even worse downfall than actually falling down the cliff, as the warboss's right arm grabbed almost the entirety of her upper body in it, tearing out a muffled scream of pain from Arconi due to the crushing pressure. Said scream was apparently still audible enough to reach into Richard's mind and pull him back to consciousness. When he fully came to, his eyes widened in terror and then wrath upon seeing his commanding officer in the clutches of the damnable creature.
Do something. Come on, Richard.
He used this newfound fire to grab his last gun and pick himself up. Finally appearing less crazed, Dakajaw lifted up his catch, bringing her closer to his face as he spoke in as chilling of a tone as possible for an orc.
You's the one that hyped me out, broke me mega shooter, and ruined me jaw. All you skits is getting crumped. I want you to scream as I squeeze your guts out of yours for doing all that.
He then began to tighten the squeeze of his grip,
Richard!
eliciting another cry of pain from his captive. Seeing her suffer made the abominable Xenos chuckle grimly. His amusement would be interrupted by someone shouting at the top of their lungs, a shout that also seemed to wake Johann as well. Both Dakajaw and Katerina were barely able to look in its direction before the screaming private lunged, impaling his bayonet in the side of York's chest a little under the armpit, and then fired his weapon on full auto. Just as he did so, the quartermaster tried lifting his hell gun, but several disapproving hisses from it informed him that it was in need of repair before it could be used again. Gruber cursed in his mind when his side glance caught a glimpse of something gold reflecting the sunlight at him. Turning his head, he saw the Aquila piece of cloth the Brutalian had worked on next to a long metal pole. Reeling from the smaller Hume's assault, Dakajaw bellowed as well before getting a hold of himself and swatting down at him with his right hand. From the strike, he lost his grip on the one with the pointy hat, but sent the small red one crashing into the rubble and
No, Bobson, don't die. I don't want anyone to die. I don't want anyone to die.
Both pieces of rebar piercing through Bobson's back on the side and sticking out a hand's length out from his midsection, making his body go rigid.
No!
Idea, stupid umis!
He began to yell when a similar piece of rebar was thrust into the base of his spine by the deathly silent Krieger, driving the metal as deeply as possible. Due to his greater bulk and ramming speed, the quartermaster made the war boss stumble forward, surprised by the unseen attack. By what could only be the Emperor's grace, the tables had truly turned, as Katerina, who had just recovered herself, rolled out of the way as to not be stomped by the giant orc's boot. It attempted to reach back and grasp Johann with its left arm, but before it could, the power saber lopped off its forearm in the motion it took Arconi to get up, following which she shoved the head of her Godwin inside of the hole Richard had created and fired a single bolt into the Xenos' bowels, before jumping away to the side. Mere heartbeats later, Dakajaw's torso momentarily inflated as the round detonated inside of him. Smoke and blood poured out of his side wound and his maw as he stumbled for a couple more steps, falling forward on the ridge crest, his right arm dangling down as a slurry of mulched guts began to leak from his mouth. It was at that point that the rest of the squad made it to their position. Dan, Gergoda, and Ramil deployed on the ridge crest and began laying down fire on the incoming greenskins, while Lawrence rushed over to Richard's side.
Ah, hell, kid! Kid, stay awake! Bloody cock, you're losing a lot of blood.
He hurriedly spoke as he pulled him off of the rebar. As he did so, Bobson coughed out blood and frailly spoke.
I'm sorry, sir.
No! No, don't die. Don't die. Stay awake. Stay conscious.
Zip it! Focus on staying conscious.
Cadian, get over here and fire!
Gus yelled at him as he ran by, using the running start to pitch a grenade he had unpinned.
Emperor, damn it!
Dusk cursed as he dragged the Brutalian along with himself to the ridge and began firing down. A few other Xenos had begun climbing on the squad's side, causing Ramil to shift his focus and begin gunning them down to the best of his ability. Dakajaw coughed out more of his insides and attempted to lift his head. His effort would be in vain, as Gruber, who had climbed up on the orc's back, drove the metal bar straight into the alien's skull as Katerina walked over to the beast's side. Looking down, she was glad to see the creature dead. However, she was surprised to see the bulk of the incoming orcs slightly halt and look up at their position in concerned awe. That was the best approximation she could make of their faces, if that was indeed an emotion possible for the vermin to exhibit. Her confusion would be slightly dashed when a flutter of cloth caught her attention. Looking up, she would see the tattered squad banner that the Brutalian had mentioned sewing together a couple of times, being attached to the metal bar the Krieger had used, waving Imperial pride above the heads of the heathen scum below. That's when realization struck her. Not only had they slain their war boss, but they had planted the Imperium's victory over it, which was giving the aliens pause.
A symbol of fear. Yes, yes.
Pride and satisfaction flushed her chest as she raced for Aquila-bearing blade in the direction of their foes and shouted out in challenge to them. Others from the squad did the same, assuming intimidation poses as they continued to rain death towards the aliens. Some among the wretched rabble began to regain their courage, but before they could voice their hideous war cry, a far more noble and righteous one drowned their voices out. Looking further back, the squad could see another mob, consisting of humans, rushing over. All of the slaves they had freed had managed to organize, as many of them now wielded firearms and wore armor, likely reclaimed from the greenskins' stolen supplies. The venerable spear of red-eyed servants of the Golden Throne washed over the orcoids and began to brutalize them. It was an image that could almost bring a tear to Katerina's eye. Alas, there would be no time for that, as another cough gathered everyone's attention over to the bleeding Bobson.
Private!
Arconi shouted and then commanded.
Sergeant, set him down. Gruber, get to work.
Sir.
Richard muttered out before coughing again.
Save your strength, Private. You don't need to speak right now.
I just wanted to apologize.
Apologize about what? Just stay awake, man. You can apologize later. You're not dying. Okay? You are not dying. Gruber, get to work.
That comment made everyone raise a brow, the commissar more so than the rest, prompting her to inquire.
Apologize about what? You saved me and got us this victory.
For acting so rudely around you and Johann because of your relationship.
Upon uttering those words, the Krieger momentarily paused his efforts to patch the Bertilian up, as everyone else looked at him, then at the commissar, who bore an expression of utter stunned confusion. Her mind was furiously trying to process what the young man meant, but
oh, Bobson, what a time to talk about this. You might die, Bobson, but man, you'll give me such a laugh, such an enjoyable laugh. Oh.
Despite the effort, she could not come up with anything that even approached a meaningful explanation.
What? With Gruber? What delusional grug shit are you spouting, maggot?
That time, a couple of nights before, we counted the gangers. Near the end of my shift, I saw Johann sneak it over to your tent, and got curious. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have, but I'd heard it all, and want you to know that I wish you a good life together after all of this is done.
If you're going to die, die on your own terms, Bobson. Yeah, die on your own terms. She can't do anything now. She can't do anything now to you. Oh wow, Bobson. What a time. What a time to confess. To tell them about this story. Oh my gosh.
Those seemed to be all of the words Richard had the breath for, as his mind drifted into darkness.
Wait, no, you don't get to die after saying all that shit. Do you hear me, Private?
Katerina yelled, as she also knelt down, trying to shake the man awake.
Private! Richard! Private Richard Bobson, do you hear me?
Wait, this is an eye. Okay. Is it an orc eye or is... Maybe it belongs to the Dienstiller cult creature. What was it called again? Yamgrol? Yeah. Oh, so they're being watched right now. They're being watched by this creature. Yikes. Wow, guys, yeah, that that was Doom Faith Humanity episode 7 on the Das Rat YouTube channel. Yeah, this operation was amazing, really. It was amazing from beginning to end. Hopefully Bobson is okay. Hopefully Bobson is going to be fine. Gruber is going to be able to save his life. Yeah, I'm just crossing fingers because you can't die. After dropping such a bomb, you can't just die and leave us hanging like that. No. I want Katerina to set the record straight. I want Gruber to set the record straight, okay? So, yeah, don't die, Bobson. And the citizens of Brutal 4 also, after being assisted by Katerina and her forces to attain their freedom, they also got to work in defeating the orcs, which I'm very happy about. Brutal 4 will never be theirs. The hive cities of Brutal 4 will never be belonging to the orcs. Never. It will belong to the citizens of the Imperium of Man, no matter what. And I'm happy. Really, I'm so happy. Yeah, everybody did their job quite flawlessly, especially when it came to Gargota as well as Gus. When they were dealing with the mech, what was it called again? Gargant. Yeah, when they dealt with the mech Gargant, using using the orc driver to crash his truck right into the fuel lines for the Gargant, and it exploded. And I'm happy that they dealt with this very dangerous mechanized unit that could have really devastated the Imperium of Man forces as well as the civilians of Brutal 4. So I'm happy that they dealt with that. The truck, reliable convenience, has met its fiery end, explosive end. It took out as many of the orcs with it as possible, and it was a good death. It was a very powerful death. It wasn't going quietly into the night. It didn't die of old age. It died with a bang. And I think any machine spirit would be proud of that. So yeah, the reliable convenience is no more with us. And yeah, at the end there with the credits, I don't know what was going on there. I think that eye belongs to the Gene Stealer cult, strain monster, the Yomgrol. I think that eye belongs to it. So I think they're still going to be dealing with the Gene Stealer in the next episode probably. But for now, this Hive City in particular has dealt with the bloody boss Dakajaw and his forces. For now, it seems that the orcs in this region, in this Hive City, have been dealt with. They are running away because of Bobson's flag that he sewed together, and it became that symbol of fear for the orcs. So now the orcs have dispersed after the death of the war boss, and yeah, hopefully this Hive City can be further secured, because they still need to deal with the Gene Stealer cult in the Underhive. I don't know how they're going to deal with that situation right now. But yeah, essentially, so far so good in this particular Hive City. The rest of the planet, we're not entirely sure yet. But so far so good with the team. And hopefully Bobson can stay alive, because we need him. We need him for the funny jokes, for the funny situations. We need him for his strength and determination and his belief in his people of Brutal 4. Because the other Imperial Guard members, they don't really trust civilians. They don't really have any faith in the people of Brutal 4. So the advocate for Brutal 4 is Bobson. So he needs to stay alive. He needs to be there to be the voice of the people, and to give confidence for Katerina to actually trust in the people of Brutal 4, that they will do what is necessary to defend their home from the orcs or from whatever else is, creating some sort of foothold on the planet. So, Bobson, stay alive. Stay alive, and I'll see you in episode 8. Yeah. Okay, guys, that is it with episode 7. Remember, if you want to check out the original video as well as Das Rad's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos, and I'll see you guys hopefully next week. I'm not entirely sure because I have family obligations to deal with, so I'm not entirely sure, but I'm gonna try and be here next week as well. Yeah. Okay. Bye bye.